My late husband has a daughter, Michaela, from his previous marriage. She was 9 years old when we got married. Her mom was attempting to alienate her from us. She talked negatively about me. Keep in mind, my ex knew very little about me. Before anyone asks, I didn't break up their marriage. They divorced when Michaela was 5, and I met my husband 2 years later. His ex still wanted him back and kept telling Michaela that I was the reason they weren't getting back together. My husband was the one who left her because she cheated and had no plans. He was in a long court battle to get more time with Michaela. But it's safe to say that Michaela didn't like me and felt like I was the witch who was keeping her daddy from her mommy. I tried to bond with her, but she rejected me time and time again. Together, my husband and I had 3 children. A little after our youngest was born, when Michaela was 13, her mom was arrested and sentenced to 15 years in prison. My husband received sole custody. It was a big adjustment for Michaela. We got her into therapy. She still wanted very little to do with me or her siblings. I went to therapy with her, but eventually, the therapist said that the best thing I could do is give Michaela space. Pushing the issue would just push her away. The therapist also told Michaela she didn't have to like me, but she did need to treat me like a human being. And as I always respected her, she needed to respect me. Michaela did not listen. She called me horrible names, said nasty things to her siblings, kept asking her dad to divorce me. It led to a lot of arguments with my husband because I was giving her space, treated her with kindness, and I was her punching bag. He said she had been through a lot, but I truly think it's because she was nice to him. Even her therapist was concerned, but nothing changed. Michaela is now 15. My other 3 children are 4, 4, and 2. My husband passed away 6 months ago. Initially, I took custody of Michaela because her only other family were her maternal grandparents in another state. Michaela even said she wanted to stay with me so she could stay near her friends. I kept her in therapy, but the treatment got worse. I tried to understand. She's lost 2 parents in a short period. She's stuck with the woman she was conditioned to resent, and 3 little ones. I've tried everything while balancing my own grief and handling the little ones. It came to a head a couple of weeks ago. Michaela was out, I put the little ones to bed. I ended up having a good cry because I was just so stressed and missing my husband. Michaela came home and asked what was wrong. I told her. She began calling me a whiny drama queen, saying now I know how her mom felt when he wouldn't take her back. She called me a bunch of terrible names and kept following me to taunt me as I walked away. I finally locked myself in my room. After speaking to my own therapist, I realized this isn't good for my mental health. I called her grandparents and said I'd sign custody over to them. I asked them to come get her sooner than later. When I told Michaela, she started crying. She begged me to let her stay. I said no, if I'm so awful, if I'm such a witch, she shouldn't be here. She said she didn't mean it. I looked her in the eye and said she's been saying it for 6 years. I'm finally setting her free. She won't have to deal with me or her demon spawn brothers, her words, ever again. She said her grandparents have a lot of rules. I told her that's a shame, but maybe it'll straighten her out. It was the harshest I've ever been with her, but I just couldn't keep up the kindness. They came to get her within a few days. She didn't say goodbye. Her grandparents have maintained contact with me, told me they're getting her a new therapist, and she'll attend a new school in the fall. I said I hope she does better. Friends of my husband find this all to be incredibly cruel. She says I should have tried harder, that shipping her off won't do any good. They say it isn't what he would have wanted. Am I the jerk for sending her away? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot, you have gone above and beyond in trying to support Michaela through her trauma, but there comes a point where your mental health and the well-being of your younger children must be prioritized. Michaela's behavior was hurtful and detrimental to your household. Sometimes a different environment with her grandparents, who are willing to continue therapy and provide structure, can be the best solution for her. Comment 2. 1, if it wouldn't have been what he wanted, then he should have made more of an effort to make her behave instead of making excuses for her. 2, it may not do her any good, but it will do OP a world of good. 3, OP has a responsibility to her 3 small children who were being verbally abused by their stepsister. 4, although OP took guardianship when her husband died, she really had no responsibility to do so. Now, for the update, thank you for reading my last post. 3 months have passed since Michaela went to live with her grandparents, and things have taken a turn I didn't expect. Initially, I thought it would be a relief to have her out of the house, but the reality has been much more complicated. The first few weeks were eerily quiet. The little ones seemed to sense the tension had lifted, and I was able to focus more on them and my own grief. But then, I started getting calls from Michaela's grandparents. They were struggling with her behavior, and it sounded like things were even worse than they had been here. Michaela was skipping school, getting into fights, and refusing to go to therapy. They were at their wits' end and didn't know what to do. I felt a pang of guilt every time they called. Maybe I had made a mistake by sending her away, but I also knew I couldn't handle her behavior on top of everything else. I tried to offer advice, but it was clear they were overwhelmed. One day, Michaela's grandmother called me in tears, saying Michaela had run away. They had no idea where she was and were terrified something had happened to her. I felt a wave of panic and guilt wash over me. Had I pushed her too far? I spent the next few days in a state of anxiety, waiting for news. Finally, they found her at a friend's house, safe but defiant. She refused to go back to her grandparents' house and said she wanted to come back to me. I was torn. On one hand, I didn't want to disrupt the fragile peace I had found with my own children. On the other hand, I couldn't ignore the fact that Michaela was clearly struggling and needed help. I decided to talk to my therapist about it. She suggested that maybe Michaela needed to feel like she had some control over her life. She had lost both her parents and was now being shuffled around. Maybe if I gave her a choice, it would help her feel more secure. So I called Michaela and told her she could come back, but there would be rules. She would have to go to therapy, attend school, and treat everyone in the house with respect. She agreed, and a week later, she was back. At first, things seemed to be going well. Michaela was more subdued, and I thought maybe the time away had given her some perspective, but it didn't last. She started skipping therapy sessions and staying out late. One night, she didn't come home at all. I was frantic, calling her friends and driving around looking for her. She finally came home the next morning, reeking of alcohol and with a defiant look in her eye. I was furious and scared. I grounded her and took away her phone, but it only made things worse. She became more rebellious and started sneaking out at night. I felt like I was losing control of everything. My own grief was still raw, and I was struggling to keep up with the demands of my younger children. One night, after a particularly bad argument with Michaela, I broke down. I called my husband's best friend, someone who had always been supportive, and poured my heart out. He listened patiently and then said something that shook me. He told me that maybe I was trying too hard to be Michaela's mother when what she really needed was a friend. He suggested that I try to connect with her on a different level, to find common ground and build a relationship from there. I decided to give it a try. The next day, I asked Michaela if she wanted to go out for coffee. She looked surprised but agreed. We went to a local cafe and just talked. I asked her about her friends, her interests, and her dreams. She was hesitant at first, but gradually she started to open up. I learned that she felt like she didn't belong anywhere, that she was angry and scared all the time. She missed her dad and felt abandoned by her mom. She didn't know how to deal with all the emotions she was feeling, and lashed out because it was the only way she knew how to cope. I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe there was a way to reach her after all. Over the next few weeks, I tried to spend more one-on-one time with Michaela. We went for walks, watched movies, and just talked. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like we were making progress. Then one night, everything fell apart. Michaela came home late again, and this time she was high. I lost it. I yelled at her, told her she was throwing her life away and that I couldn't keep doing this. She screamed back that she hated me, that I was the reason her life was a mess, and that she wished I had died instead of her dad. The words cut deep, and I felt like I had failed her completely. The next day, I called her grandparents and told them I couldn't do it anymore. They came to get her that afternoon. Michaela didn't say a word to me as she left. I felt a mix of relief and crushing guilt. Had I given up too easily? Could I have done more? But I also knew I had to protect my own mental health and the well-being of my younger children. In the weeks since Michaela left, I've tried to focus on rebuilding a sense of normalcy for my family. The little ones are doing better, and I'm trying to take care of myself, but the guilt lingers. I keep in touch with Michaela's grandparents, and they tell me she's still struggling but is going to therapy regularly. I hope she finds the help she needs, but I also know I can't be the one to give it to her. Thank you for reading. Am I the idiot for calling out my gossiping coworker after she spread lies about my health? My 19-year-old female have had horrible period pains since I was very young. I'm talking bedridden pain for 4 days, throwing up, nausea, lethargic, heavy bleeding, 10-day periods, headaches, the whole 9 yards. I come from a bit of a conservative family, so anything like birth control or intrauterine devices weren't something I was allowed to explore. But now that I'm over 18, I've taken it upon myself to investigate my medical issues. I've been in contact with a gynecologist who suspects I have a large cyst on an ovary and endometriosis. It's in the early stages, but getting somewhere. I was in the break room at work with my colleague S, 32-year-old female, when I got a phone call from the gynecologist's office who wanted to confirm a few of my details for my appointment the next day. I told the receptionist that I hadn't gotten the ultrasound done yet, but would get it done in the morning before the appointment. From my understanding, my colleague heard this and started telling my other colleagues at the office that I'm pregnant. It wasn't revealed to me until another colleague, Jay, 50-year-old male, told her off for putting my business on display. That she was a bad person for revealing such things about me, and that it wasn't hers or anyone's business without exclusively getting the okay from me. When I first heard the rumor, I just thought it was strange, but I laughed it off like, haha, maybe one day, but definitely not now. I did agree with Jay, but I also just thought of it as someone who wanted to share exciting news that wasn't true and didn't think too much of it. The way I was treated in the office hasn't changed. I'm not being treated differently, maybe with just a bit more care. But I'm the baby of the office anyway. I never confronted S, but I thanked Jay for defending me. Now the office knows I'm not pregnant, but potentially suffering from endometriosis, as I've smoothed the rumor. But turns out this has made it worse for S, as it's gone from exciting news to something bad, and it's left a bad taste in people's mouths. S confronted me yesterday, telling me why I hadn't smoothed it out with everyone. That she had unintentionally revealed good news that she misunderstood. I explained to her that I didn't think it was a big deal, but I can't control the way people feel. She's been kinda cold and pissy at me since. Now for an update. Turns out someone has reported her to Human Resources, and she's due for a meeting in the coming week. We're unsure what this means for her and her career, but clearly people that aren't me truly dislike what she's done. The only reason why I'm not going out of my way to defend her is due to the fact that if this had happened to anyone but me, this could be detrimental. So it's to avoid any issues in the future. I considered emailing Human Resources telling them I'm not offended or anything. I'm not sure what to do. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. You know what I've done the couple of times I've suspected a colleague is pregnant? Absolutely nothing. I once took a call about some biopsy results for a pet, and office people heard me ask, "So not cancer?" And they checked with me, not gossiped with each other. Until or unless you are specifically told you are allowed to share information, you do not share it. You don't need to do or say anything unless HR asks you specifically. You've clarified where you can or where you want to, but right now she is wearing the consequences of her own actions. Comment 2. Not the idiot. I don't understand why you're not mad as hell about this person spreading false medical details about you, telling people you're pregnant. That was a horrible thing to do, and that was deliberate. You've ended up feeling as though you had to tell people your genuine medical issues and they should be private and personal. But you just do you. She's done something very wrong, and it's probably not the first time. Let HR deal with her. But she did do something very bad. Please stop defending her. That was not okay. Now for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post. So after the whole incident with S and the rumors, things have taken quite a turn. The HR meeting happened, and it turns out S received a formal warning. She was visibly upset after the meeting and has been avoiding me and most of the office since then. I felt a bit guilty, but I also knew that what she did was wrong and could have serious consequences for anyone else in the future. In the meantime, I finally had my ultrasound done. The results confirmed that I have a large cyst on my ovary, and the gynecologist suspects endometriosis. They've scheduled me for a laparoscopy next month to get a clearer picture and possibly remove the cyst. It's a bit scary, but I'm relieved to finally be getting some answers and a plan for treatment. Back at work, the atmosphere has been tense. S has been giving me the cold shoulder, and it's clear she's still upset about the whole situation. I tried to talk to her a couple of times, but she just brushed me off. It's awkward because we used to be pretty friendly. I've noticed that she's been more isolated, and some of our colleagues are keeping their distance from her too. I guess they're wary of getting involved in any more drama. One day, I overheard Jay talking to another colleague about how S had a history of spreading personal information. Apparently, this wasn't the first time she's done something like this. A few years ago, she shared details about another colleague's divorce, which caused a lot of tension in the office. I didn't know about this before, and it made me realize that maybe S has a pattern of overstepping boundaries. This got me thinking about my own boundaries and how I handle my personal information. I've always been pretty open, but this whole experience has made me more cautious. I've started to keep more things to myself and only share personal details with people I really trust. It's a bit sad because I used to feel like the office was a safe space, but now I'm more guarded. In the midst of all this, I've been dealing with my health issues. The pain has been pretty intense, and I've had to take a few days off work. My boss has been understanding, but I can tell it's causing some strain on the team. They've had to pick up the slack, and I feel guilty about that. I've been trying to work from home when I can, but it's not the same as being there in person. One day, while I was working from home, I got a call from my mom. She's always been a bit overprotective, and when I told her about my health issues, she freaked out. She started blaming herself for not letting me explore birth control options earlier. I tried to reassure her that it wasn't her fault, but she was really upset. It made me realize how much my family's conservative views have impacted my health and my life choices. I also had a heart-to-heart with my dad. He's always been the more laid-back parent, but he admitted that he felt guilty too. He said he wished he had been more open-minded and supportive. It was a tough conversation, but it brought us closer. I think they both understand now that I need to make my own decisions about my health. Back at work, things took another turn. S decided to take a leave of absence. She said she needed time to reflect and figure things out. I don't know if she'll come back, but I hope she takes this time to really think about her actions and how they affect others. It's been a bit of a relief not having her around, but I also feel bad for her. I don't think she's a bad person, just someone who doesn't always think before she acts. In the meantime, I've been focusing on my health and trying to stay positive. I've started seeing a therapist to help me cope with the stress and anxiety. It's been really helpful to have someone to talk to who understands what I'm going through. I've also been doing more research on endometriosis and connecting with others who have the same condition. It's comforting to know I'm not alone. One thing that's been on my mind is how this whole experience has changed me. I've become more assertive and more aware of my boundaries. I've also learned to be more empathetic towards others. I used to be pretty judgmental, but now I try to see things from other people's perspectives. It's not always easy, but I think it's made me a better person. As for the future, I'm taking things one day at a time. I'm hopeful that the laparoscopy will give me some answers and relief from the pain. I'm also trying to rebuild my relationships at work and at home. It's been a challenging few weeks, but I'm learning and growing from it. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for telling my wife to get therapy after she accused me of spying on her? My wife and I have a 1-year-old son. We're both fiscally responsible people. Her mother historically has spent pretty well outside of her means, and as a result, I'm putting into our son's college savings account while she's helping her mother pay off debt. Her mother lives with us and helps out with our son. Pretty good deal. Since the very day our son was born, my wife has formed this bizarre belief that I'm going to abandon her and accused me of abandoning her the day of his birth and start a new family. It was some weird postpartum stuff. She even accused me of hiding cameras around the house to record her. Overall, it was pretty bad for a good 6 months. It's now been over a year, and I thought her crazy stuff had calmed down. We're setting up our son's college fund. I've transferred a bunch of money in, and we're talking about how much I'll be putting in next year. She'll apparently be putting in nothing. She proceeds to tell me that I need to put in all this money while she'll be putting in nothing, and she tells me, by the way, she's assigned her mother as her life insurance beneficiary because I'll move on and start a new family if she dies, and her mother's the one she trusts to watch out for our son's interests. I have never at any point ever told her any of this stuff. I have never expressed a desire to leave her, to start a new family, anything. This is all stuff she made up in her head. And it's not like I'm fiscally irresponsible. I bought a house at 23, which I financed by renting out rooms. I was the handyman, took care of tenant issues, including when one had a psychotic episode, and worked. She met me during the tail end of this period of my life. So, am I the jerk for telling her she needs to get her mental stuff together? Because this bizarre fantasy of me leaving her to start a new family is eating away at my mental health and clearly affecting major financial decisions? To address some common themes. 1. This is exactly what her father did to her and her mother. The Freudian level stuff is not complicated here. 2. It's definitely not her mother. Her mother helped talk her down from a couple crisis points over the year. While her mother does talk endless stuff, it's not about me, our kid, or our marriage. Very conservative background. Does not believe in divorce, and believes strongly in families sticking together, even when they're nuts. 3. I've spent the last year and some months leading up to the birth trying to get her to talk to someone appropriate. She is highly resistant. Post-COVID therapists mostly want to talk over video chat. The first one she found reinforced her irrational fears that she should prepare for our kid's death in the neonatal intensive care unit. Large effort. Has not gone well at all. 4. To the person who advised I buy the postpartum husband. Thank you. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. While reading this, my husband and I both agree that her mother is probably feeding this delusion. However, we agree that she needs professional counseling to get grounded back into reality. Did she grow up with a single mother and a father who left? Are there any other possible abandonment issues you aren't aware of? Not the idiot, and I would tell her that you will create a separate account that you will control alone for your son's future, unless she agrees to individual counseling and couples counseling to get to the bottom of this problem. Comment 2. Not the idiot, please set up everything so that if something happens to you, leave all your assets to your child in a trust, so no one can get into it at all except your child when they're old enough. Don't leave her anything. Take her name off any accounts she doesn't contribute to. She needs mental help. I don't know how you can stay with someone so selfish. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading. So, a week after my last update, things took a turn I didn't see coming. My wife and I were having dinner, and out of nowhere, she mentioned that she had been thinking about going back to work. She said she wanted to contribute more financially and not just rely on me. I was surprised, but supportive. I thought maybe this was a sign she was starting to feel more like herself again. The next day, she started looking for jobs online. She seemed really motivated, and I was hopeful this would be a positive change. But then she got a call from an old friend she hadn't spoken to in years. This friend had recently gone through a messy divorce and was now a single mom. They talked for hours, and I could see my wife getting more and more agitated as the conversation went on. After the call, she was in a weird mood. She started questioning everything again. Our relationship, my loyalty, even our financial plans. She said her friend had warned her about how men can change after having kids, and that she needed to be prepared for the worst. I tried to reassure her, but it felt like we were back to square one. A couple of days later, I came home from work to find my wife and her mother in a heated argument. Her mother was trying to convince her that she was overreacting and that I wasn't going to leave her. My wife was yelling that no one understood her and that she was just trying to protect our son. It was heartbreaking to watch. That night, after her mother had gone to bed, my wife and I had a long talk. She admitted that she was scared all the time and didn't know how to stop feeling this way. She said she felt like she was losing control and didn't know how to get it back. I suggested again that she see a therapist, but she was still resistant. She said she didn't trust them after her last experience. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called a therapist who specializes in postpartum issues and explained the situation. The therapist suggested that we come in for a joint session to start, to make my wife feel more comfortable. I managed to convince my wife to give it a try, and we had our first session a few days later. The session was intense. The therapist asked a lot of questions about our relationship, our son, and my wife's fears. My wife was hesitant at first, but eventually she opened up. She talked about how her father's abandonment had left a deep scar, and how she was terrified of history repeating itself. The therapist suggested that my wife might be projecting her unresolved issues with her father onto me. After the session, my wife seemed a bit more at ease. She agreed to continue seeing the therapist, and I felt a glimmer of hope. But then, something unexpected happened. My wife found out she was pregnant again. This news brought a mix of emotions: joy, fear, and uncertainty. She was worried that another pregnancy would make her anxiety worse, and I was concerned about how we would manage everything. We decided to take things one day at a time. My wife continued her therapy sessions, and I tried to be as supportive as possible. Her mother also stepped up, taking on more responsibilities around the house and with our son. It felt like we were starting to find a new balance. But then, my wife had a miscarriage. It was devastating for both of us. She blamed herself, saying that her stress and anxiety had caused it. I tried to reassure her that it wasn't her fault, but she was inconsolable. She withdrew into herself, and it felt like we were losing all the progress we had made. In the midst of all this, I found out that my job was downsizing, and I might be laid off. This added another layer of stress to an already difficult situation. I didn't know how we were going to manage financially if I lost my job, especially with my wife not working and her mother's debt still looming over us. One night, as I was lying in bed, I started thinking about my own childhood. My parents had a rocky marriage, and I remembered how their constant fighting had affected me. I realized that I didn't want my son to grow up in a household filled with tension and fear. I wanted him to feel safe and loved, no matter what. I decided to have another talk with my wife. I told her about my fears and how I didn't want our son to go through what I did as a child. I asked her to consider going back to work, not just for the financial benefits, but to give her a sense of purpose and independence. I also suggested that we look into couples therapy to work on our relationship together. To my surprise, she agreed. She said she was willing to do whatever it took to make things better for our family. We started looking for job opportunities for her, and I began researching couples therapists. It felt like we were finally on the same page, working towards a common goal. But before I tell you how that turned out, there's something else you need to know. My wife's mother, who had always been a pillar of support, revealed that she had been diagnosed with a serious illness. She didn't want to burden us with her problems, but she couldn't hide it any longer. This news hit us hard, and we realized that we needed to come together as a family more than ever. So that's where we are now. We're facing a lot of challenges, but we're trying to stay strong for each other and for our son. Thanks for reading. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day!